look at the first couple of pages of the document. Go on through. Now you don't have to tab this, but scroll up. I mean, move up just so I'm so used to no, like the other way.
Oh, okay.
What page is that right there?
This is introduction page, so that's page 5.
Go past that one. Page 5 is cool. I mean, I really and when I say that, I'm not saying that just, you know, casting that aside, but where's the one about the laws and stuff? Here we go.
Here it is.
Go to page 8, 9. I want you guys to look over that. When you guys go back to your departments, by the way, these things are only, and I'm so sorry, eligible for people who attend my trainings, and especially small trainings like this. I don't take these to my large scale trainings because I put these together. As you guys see, that takes about 30 minutes per book. So, but anyway, page 8 and 9 really gives you an idea of some of the legal implications within our standards. For instance, we are absolutely required to do, it is federal law to do Constitution Day. If you're not doing Constitution Day, get on it, make this the year that you do it. Because if you receive federal funding, you must do Constitution Day. Also, if you receive federal funding, you must do Veterans Day. That's another one of those, to make sure that we really do. You guys will also see in there the Kentucky statute for teaching the Holocaust, that is middle through high school. That is 6 through 12. Students must engage in Holocaust education during that time period with their experience. And there's a couple of other things. We actually have a new law about a certain set of documents. I think there are 20 or 24 documents. That is not evident in this yet, but I will send that out to you guys later. Now that I know who you guys are and you've signed up on the thing, you are forever going to be on my emails and that kind of thing. kystandards.org, you guys have a copy of this PowerPoint. So you don't really even have to write that down, but there's a few things that as we go through and talk about them, if you guys would put them on your note gathering, that's just to kind of pull out that information. Like if it's something that I would write down, I'll say, write this down. That way when you go back to look at the PowerPoint, you know those places to really emphasize when you guys come back and look at it. But kystandards.org is your everything standards. Bookmark it, put it inside, you know, this document came from that, but put this, bookmark this on your computer, put this in the bookmarks bar. Because this is everything you need. Have you visited kystandards.org? Excellent, that's wonderful. So you guys can see here, so you are high school and you are middle. So I'll just go on to the next page. I was hoping to see some K-5 folks. But if you would tab, for middle school, tab page 96. And put grade band, if you want, on the cute little note. And by the way, you're welcome again. These are I don't share these tabs with just anybody. These are what I hoard for me. So I can mark my books, but I'm sharing them with you guys. So you can just write on there what your grade level is, and in high school, you're page 139. There's no kicks and giggles and fun little things in the high school stuff, because we are just who we are, because I too am high school, by the way. I'm middle high. I'm one of the few dinosaurs, if not the only dinosaur left, that has a 712 certification. I think all the other 712 certifications have retired. But I'm not 612 or 512, I am 712. That's what's unique. So tab that first section, because that will tell you about your grade band. So what is the architecture of the CAS for social studies? So let's go ahead, if you guys would, and go into your note taking. And we'll kind of go through and talk about these really quickly. Like I said, this is drinking from the fire hose. When we talk about the organization of our standards, and you guys also have this. So we'll kind of look at these two. So sorry. When you're old, you have reminders on your phone. So it just happens. So anyway, so the organization of our standards, this is on page 13 and 14 in that book that I gave you guys. So if you wanted to take a tab and put it there really quickly so that you can come to this, especially if you go back and share with your PLCs. In Jenna's case, she is her PLC. So for the greatest part, and then hopefully works with the high school a little bit. When we look at, what do you guys notice when you look at this? Have you worked with this much, Sydney?
Yeah.
Good. So when you look at this, what do you guys notice? What do you know?
It's inquiry-based.
It's inquiry-based? Why do you know that? Now notice that, by the way, notice how I'm asking you for evidence.
Yeah.
Don't ever let your kids give an answer in your classroom that you do not say, why do you know that, or how do you know that? So why do you know that, Sydney?
Because you are communicating, you're using your evidence, you're understanding. We don't want you to just take the information. We want you to do something with it.
Do you see any key or cue words there that when you look at that tells you this inquiry?
Questioning.
Questioning.
Yeah.
Any others, Jenna, you want to jump in there? Are there any other words that you see there that tells you it's inquiry-based?
Using evidence.
Using evidence. Beautiful. Investigating is one. But the big word for me is claims. Now, by the way, in the standards, this is a typo, in the standards, you guys will notice, whenever you see it, it says communicating conclusions. When they did this graphic and included it as part of this, little typo. Instead of saying communicating claims, it should actually say communicating conclusions. Those conclusions are claims, but not in the standards document itself. What's something else that you notice about our standards that you know by looking at this? Remember, this is just the three of us, technically four, but it's just the three of us, you guys. I do not take your birthday if you're wrong. I do not call the FBI or KDE or the EPSB. It's just a wrong answer, and it's not even wrong. It's going to lead you to the right answer. We have to get our kids in the habit of that too. Let them know that absolute answers do no longer exist in social studies.
It's broad.
It is broad.
It's not just focused on history.
Oh, thank you. I was hoping that. So what is it focused on then?
Well, all
It's
it's the
focused on
social
social
studies.
Social studies. Thank you, thank you. So yes, in Kentucky we have two types of standards. So you can write this in on your lovely little graphic I copied for you there, or you can write it into your note taking. We have two types of standards. Sometimes people look at the teal, and they'll say, "Oh, that's the process." Well, it is process, but here's the thing: when you look at that teal, that is a set of standards too. And in Kentucky, according to our academic or our assessment blueprint, if it is a standard, it is eligible for assessment. So that's a big thing to remember when you look at that. So the inquiry practices and the disciplinary strand standards are standards. So kind of like I said a moment ago, when we start thinking about process, we also think of process. The reason why sometimes we think of process, now KDE does not prescribe a process, or let's say for instance, an instructional plan. In this case for us though, as social studies people, it's a process of how we think. So that's why I put process up there. When you look at it, when you think about questioning, investigating, using evidence, communicating, all of those things together feel very much like a process. Plus you have a nice little arrow that will guide you in that direction. And then we have our disciplinary strands, like you guys said a second ago, it's no longer the strong history focus, because we've learned, what has 125 years of a heavy history focus done for us in social studies? Well, judging by Facebook, precious little, okay? Judging by how people interact on the news, or how people interact in general, within our certain legal bodies and everything else, it's done very little for us. So that's the beauty of inquiry, most importantly, taking an all-inclusive approach, is that we're going to make, we're hopefully going to be creating those informed, prepared citizens, because that really is the goal for us in social studies. That's one thing that you guys will see there on the introduction on page 5. That is our goal. They give you this huge description about what they expect. So I love that you guys picked up on that. What's something else that you notice about those strands, especially when I go to this page?
They were color coordinated.
They're color coded,
Yeah.
yes, you're absolutely correct. I wasn't even trying to say the word now. So we see civics is blue. Thinking red, white, and blue. Of course civics is blue. Economics is yellow. I always have teachers that say, oh, I would have so made that green because of money. But you had to make the geography green because of the earth, okay? Because you'd already made civics blue, okay? But now we have purple history, and I had a teacher say, why in the world? Well, I said, think of it. Red and blue make purple. So, that's one way for us to kind of remember. But those absolutely are incredibly vital for us to remember. That sentence in black that you see there, that's bolded in Kentucky, that's for the strands in social studies, are meant to be taught in unison. This comes from KDE. This is their wording on this slide. Because I took a lot of these slides from their module, I think it's either 1 or 2, that talk about the CAS for social studies. I think it's module 1. Another thing that I really like about the Kentucky standards, and you'll see my name on the last page of the standards document because I was part of the standards writing team. And one thing that I absolutely love about our standards is now all teachers teach Kentucky studies. The beauty of it is, it's not just this flat out dedicated, moment that we do this whole big unit. And you can, in some ways. You have some schools that do a unit, depending on what grade level. We'll talk about that in a minute. But in this case, and you guys will have this, I'll put in your folder a PDF version of this presentation. And the reason why I'm going to do a PDF is that any links I have in it will be live, so that you'll be able to click on them, and plus you'll have it for your access, for your use. But in this case, each year, each grade level, now grades 6 and 7 do not have a heavy Kentucky Studies focus or Kentucky focus, because they can't. It's the nature of the beast when you look at the topics. But K through 5 and 8 through 12 do have plenty of Kentucky standards to teach. So we must make sure that we're incorporating these. And again, they're color coded. So we've gone through the first part. So let's stop there for just a moment and kind of reflect. Now again, this is drinking from the fire hose. So going back for just a second, so what are some of those things that you've taken notes on and you've looked at? Let's reflect for a moment. I didn't really put the reflections in here, and I usually do. So just seeing the architecture of the standards, what are some things that you're thinking about? That maybe was some new learning that you did not realize just a moment ago before you came in the door?
That you can teach them concurrently.
Yes, no more. I'm going to do my, like for instance, we high schoolers or high school teachers are the world's worst for this. Oh, I'm going to start the year with my economics unit, so that as I talk about things through the year, the kids are going to have familiarity with this so I can teach it better. No. Here's the thing, Nell Duke calls it naked vocabulary. Because if you're teaching economic principles in isolation, not connecting them with your community in a civic way, or not connecting them to your community in a geographic way, or, because to me, economics, and then I've had a complete turnaround, a complete flip on this. Economics, geography, and civics make our history. You don't have history unless you have those other three working together. And a really good example for me is when you look at us in Eastern Kentucky. I hate the whole concept of so many people just focus on this when they think of Eastern Kentucky. They think of the Hatfields and McCoys. That's going to be one of the first places that they go. But when you really look at those things that are going on with the Hatfields and McCoys, it's very different. It's about limited resources is what that's about. That's about, that's just part of it. It's not all of it. There's other things that come into play. But when you look at Eastern Kentucky, there is so much of our geography that make us who we are. And that geography, it makes our economics, which then in turn helps us to create our laws, which is our civics, which in turn makes our history. A good example, Mapleline. I mean, when you start looking at these places, so much of who we are in Kentucky really is linked to labor history. And that labor history, again, comes to us in a civic and a geographic way. So so that's going to be one thing to think about. Anything else that yes, we have to start doing our economics unit and teaching our geography units, and then we teach the history, because kids will never connect it.
What do we do in a situation where, you're expected to do that? So like, the curriculum map has already been.
I'm going to ask you this question. Let me
Yes.
ask you a question to answer that. What do your standards say to do?
To not.
That's all I have to say. That's all I have to say about that. What movie did that come from? Forrest Gump.
Oh,
God bless
yeah.
you, Jenna. Yes, that's all I have to say about that. So now let's go to the next section. What are the inquiry practice standards? So if we're going to talk about inquiry, I want us to break those down a little bit. Again, love it that we have a small group because we can really do that together. So this is kind of understanding the process of social studies. I probably should not use that word so casually, but for me, I think it's easier for teachers to understand. It's a step-by-step kind of thing. It's not necessarily prescribed. It's very fluid, but it's understanding how we process our standards. So you guys will see this, I think it's on page 16. Go there really quickly, flip up and see if you find that. These standards are as important, and what I could do, but I won't just yet, at the very end today, and hopefully I'll get there, I'm keeping a really close track of my time. So it's 11:09, so we finished with you guys, what time, 11:30? No, 11:50. Thank you, God. So I have 11, oh yeah, we're doing good with time. Oh, I love it. So is this on page 16? 14. I always confuse you, so tab this. And the reason being, and you guys can go back and write on it later, inquiry, whatever you need to write on it. Gosh, excuse me, but this page is incredibly important, especially as you work with your PLCs. So here we go, Sydney. So a minute ago when you said do not do our disciplinary strands as isolated units. You asked that question. One thing that's going to help us not do that as much is when we do our inquiry practices. So our people, our colleagues in our schools need a very, not only just, it's not an awareness, but a deep attachment to this process. I went to Jenna's classroom and modeled a day of inquiry. And I think for you, that day was, you got to really see your subject differently. You got to observe and not have to process and do it. Because sometimes when we're in the midst of it, doing inquiry is great and it's an awesome opportunity for us to reflect and to really learn like that. But when you have the chances for somebody else to come in and you see your kids in a different way, I think that's the more powerful learning. It's not about me and what I do, it's about what the kids do and how you can see it. And that's why I say when I come, we can talk about, who's your principal?
Martha Williams.
I thought so. I was going to say, I'll talk to Mrs. Williams about that. So understanding what each of these are, so this is what I want you guys to do. So normally what I do is an activity with this. But let's look at questioning. So if you guys turn to that page, highlighters, Mary, oh good, they're in the boxes. Grab you guys a highlighter in the boxes. Maybe they're over here. I was like, oh my gosh, did I move you guys to the front and forget the highlighters? So we're gonna highlight the 3 big takeaways for each of these paragraphs. So that again, so that as you go back and you process this information and you start thinking about it. So when I look at questioning, what are the 3 big things we need to know? So I'm gonna go ahead and guide you guys through this to save time because again, I'm gonna say it for the fourth time today, fire hose. So the development of 2 types of questions, compelling and supporting. Let's highlight that. As it says there, is essential to the study of each social studies discipline. So we have to make sure that we are engaging our students in compelling and supporting questions. And I'm going to show you how that's done instructionally in just a little bit. Second thing I would keep in mind is that compelling questions are open-ended, enduring, and centered on significant unresolved issues. I would highlight that. And then supporting questions are answers to the use of the concepts and practices of social studies discipline. And I know you guys feel like you've practically, and you have practically, highlighted the whole first part, but here's the thing. Here we go, Sydney. This is how to help others see that by engaging in compelling and supporting questions, this is how you bring in content, and this is how, we give those students, we give those students those experiences that they need, okay? Especially with an inquiry. Now let's look at investigating. For us in social studies, investigating, we've always felt like we've investigated, but if we've stood at the front of the room and lectured, we have not investigated. As a very close and dear friend of mine says, he who speaks is the person who is doing the learning. So it should not be our voice that is heard in the classroom, it should be consistently and constantly the students. So investigating here, I would highlight, allow students to gain insight into compelling and supporting questions. I would highlight that. I would highlight involves the skills students need to analyze information and develop conclusions. Those are the big things that happen in investigating. Our kids have to constantly be interacting with those supporting and compelling questions and developing their own conclusions or claims in regards to those. Using evidence. Let's look at this next category. So this one's so important that I'm not just going to skim over this one. Those top 2, easy to do. But what I would like for you guys to do is I'm going to give you a minute, because I think that's all you need. I'm going to give you probably 45 seconds. Read that paragraph really quickly. And yes, I will time. See again. And by the way, I get in the habit of timing because I time my students. Jenna will tell you, I give them time limits. Middle school and high school look very different, as they look very different to elementary, so we'll talk about that. So what are the 3 big things I want you guys to tell me? Sydney, give me one of your very first things that you're like, this is something that we need to know, a takeaway.
I kind of got the chills about they need to substantiate their claims.
Where do you see that in the paragraph?
That is the
Third line?
third
Yes.
line.
Yes, let's highlight that. Students substantiate their own claims using evidence. Good. Jenna, what is something else that we need to highlight from that paragraph?
I think the very first sentence, that all valid claims must be based on logical evidence.
Bam, let's highlight that. And I'm looking for one more thing, incredibly important. What's something else important to using evidence?
To collect,
Yes.
evaluate, synthesize, primary and secondary sources.
Good, highlight that. And highlight the rest of it to develop and support a claim. Because that's the big thing. What does it mean to collect? And I say this to people, and I know this is probably downright heretical when I say this, but I mean it with every fiber of my being. Do not cut your kids loose on Google to get their own sources. Do not do that. Because collecting means bringing together. Collecting means creating organization based on similarities, which is like categorization. Collecting means looking at the question and saying, I need this source, I don't need this one. I need this one to support my claim, I don't need this one. That is collecting. That means bringing together. Evaluating, the process of collecting brings it to evaluating. So evaluating means, is this a good source for me or a bad source? It also means, do I trust this source or do I not trust this source? Evaluating also means, do I appreciate the format of this source or not? For instance, an example of that would be, sometimes it may be better for you to use a political cartoon than it is to use an article. Because that may have points in there. So you're actually evaluating the form or the format of the source before you determine whether or not that you want to use it. So that is the process of evaluating. And synthesizing means bringing it all together, pulling out the information that you need and or want, to substantiate your claim. That's what it means to synthesize. Sometimes teachers think that means, collecting and sending the kids out on the internet. Evaluating means saying, oh, these are the ones I want to use, and this synthesizing means creating a curated list. You can do that, but I do not. Especially if you are new to inquiry and your kids are new to inquiry, that is not a process you need to be doing. Because we're going to bring the sources that they're going to have to choose from. So we've highlighted all of that. Now let's do the same thing with the next one. When we're communicating conclusions, again, just look at me when you're done. Because you guys are not students. I don't have to time it. Now don't highlight yet. We're going to highlight together.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Highlight everything, I'm so sorry.
I'll go
It's
through it,
okay. It's okay.
too. Just anything I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
just
I
read
like
it. Just
that.
read it. And that's one thing I forgot to do with you guys. I used to tell my students, if you're reading, especially first read, don't do anything. Just put the pencils or highlighters down. That was my fault as a teacher, not yours. Okay, so you guys have read it. Remind me, Joe, write this down. Say yes, man. Write this down. Remind me to talk about first read, second read, third read. At the very end, and since we're kind of flying, and I have, just a little over 30 minutes left with you, let's talk about first read, second read, third read. See, I'm already going to jump in to some pedagogical stuff with you guys, because you guys are my gifted and talented crew, okay? You're going through this fast. All right, so what are the 3 things that we need to absolutely keep in our minds when we're talking about communicating conclusions, or doing communicating conclusions?
Effectively communicate and listen.
Bless you. So let's highlight that. Effectively communicate their own conclusions. Let's highlight that whole thing. And listen carefully to the conclusions of others. That is huge. We don't see adults modeling that, do we?
No.
We see Facebook rants. Facebook rants to me make me very sad, because that tells me that that person feels completely disenfranchised. That person is not connected to what it means to be a citizen and the processes and things like that involved in being a citizen. What's another thing that we need to know?
That in a world of ever-expanding communication opportunities inside and outside the school walls, students should also be able to utilize newer media forms. Things change
Yes.
every day. There's
Every day.
newer and more modern
Yes.
takes on things.
Yes.
Sometimes things aren't set in stone.
Amen. Here's the thing. Why would we have kids communicating in ways that they don't already communicate? Kids are already using blogs to learn from. Kids are already using TikToks. Why do we have, now by the way, do redefine a little bit. We'll talk about that in a minute. So go ahead and highlight this, and this first one, let's come back and talk about it, which is students should also be able to utilize newer media forms to share their conclusions. Now let's go back to the other way. What's some other ways that we can also evaluate those?
The old ways.
The old ways. I love how you said the old ways. So essays, just highlight. Essays, reports, tables, diagrams, graphs, multimedia presentations, and discussions. We can still use those. If you guys have never done, and I highly encourage you to research this, and you can write this in your note section. I did it with my AP kids especially, but I used graded discussions. I actually have a guideline that I used. Again, I could come model that. But graded discussions, I think were really, and I know when you said, you're like, how did you grade your kids? I had a very specific format. I'm sure that I still have access to that somewhere. If not, I can do it up. I'm still thinking of how I can do that. But I had an inner-outer circle for my kids, and I don't want to go into this right now because I will start talking about it and take a lot of time away. But I had my shy kids, my 2 kids that I always knew were reading the articles and things like that. They got to be my assistants for the class. And so I had them, and they literally kept tabs of when a kid gave an answer. You were required, I actually had different levels. If you say, again, I'm talking about it, I'm hating myself. So if you only participated on 2 times, that was like considered, apprentice. If you did 3 times, proficient. If you could have participated 4 or more, you were considered distinguished for that discussion. And we kept track of that. But the thing is, when you participated, it wasn't just saying something and yelling at somebody, it was using evidence. That was the other part of my rubric. You had to use evidence. So so I had a set of questions that I gave out 3 days before the discussion. They had the materials they were going to read to answer those questions. So then on the day of what I called inner-outer circle, and we got involved in that, so we can talk about that. It is possible to grade discussions. But the big thing is, I think another thing that's very interesting is when you have students create diagrams and graphs. A huge thing right now is infographics. There's websites that you can go to. Y'all know Canva and everything else. Your kids can create infographics. It's a wonderful way to process information that you've learned and then to put it in a format to show what you have learned from it. There's all kinds of things that we can do. So that's definitely something that needs to be highlighted there too also. A little redundancy. So let's look at questioning, compelling versus supporting. So what is a compelling question? Again, you guys can read these. We've already talked about them a little bit. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. But the big thing is it focuses on big ideas. It's intellectually challenging. It's not easily answered. It's big, okay? A compelling question is huge. It inspires investigation is one of my favorite bullets on this. So thinking about that. So here are a list of potential compelling questions. So I'm not going to ask you which of the following are not compelling questions. I forgot to change this. I've been very mad at myself. What I would like for you to do is to identify. So I'm going to do something very important. Since you guys will be doing the talking, I'm going to sit. I would do that with my kids too. I would always hand the floor over. If I wanted them to talk, that was my signal. I ain't talking. So tell me the four up here. Think big. Think unresolved. Think guiding investigation. Which four up here? So I do have to, unfortunately, because I'm involved in this, I'm going to limit our discussion to 2 minutes. When this goes off, we have to stop. So I want you guys to look at these. Which four do you think are compelling? Now remember, no wrong answers. Just speed bumps in our discussion. Pull one out really quickly. So we
Can conflict truly be resolved?
Can conflict truly be resolved? Yes, is a compelling question. Another indicator for me, if it's compelling, can I apply it to multiple venues or multiple topics? I can apply that to World War I, because it definitely leads to World War II. I can apply that to the Civil War. I can apply it to the American Revolution, because God knows they came back from the War of 1812. So no, the conflict was not resolved. We can even answer that with a yes or no, but technically the kids will not. So yeah, all kinds of things you can apply it to. So yes, give me another one.
Why do I have to be responsible?
Why do I have to be responsible? A phenomenal question across every grade level. That's good for kindergarten. That's good for 4th grade. That's good for high school. Because then you're going to think, the things you're going to talk about to be responsible. But that's really good with kindergarten. Think about it. Why do I have to be responsible? Why do I have to keep up with my own pencil? Why do I have to keep up with my own notebook? I cannot imagine being a kindergarten teacher. God bless them. Give me another one really quickly. And you're doing great because we have 44 seconds left.
How does where we live affect how we live?
Oh, bam, 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 bam. I wish I had a little thing on my phone that could go ding, ding, ding. That's one of my favorites. I can use that across the board, every grade level again. Because depending on the focus for that grade level, you can really talk about this one. Yeah, absolutely. Because for us in Eastern Kentucky, how does where we live impact how we live? It impacts how we dress, how we build our houses, what jobs we have. I mean, all sorts of stuff. Awesome. You have 14 seconds to identify the other one. And I know you know it.
How do public services impact a community?
Okay, that's one that's not.
on.
Thank you for doing that one.
What
We'll come
about
back to
the What Unites Americans?
What unites Americans, yes. We could do that for 9/11. We could do that for, and I'm going to tell this thing to hush. We could do it for American Revolution. Definitely the American Revolution, that's huge. We could do that now. Because we're not united. I don't even want to talk about it. Why is that? So right there, notice how it says, how do public services impact the community? That's very targeted. That's a great supporting question though. Yeah. So now can you see? See, you learned, so you just learned.
Work for world.
Yeah.
So compelling questions are more like broad.
They are your
overview.
unit
And then,
questions.
yes, and then the other ones are more specific.
Specific to content.
Yes.
Was that us? Okay, don't want to know. So there you go. You guys did it. So supporting questions, like I said, is up here. These support the compelling question for more focused, but most importantly, this is where you get into the disciplines. This is where you get into the concepts and practices of the disciplines. Again, something, and by the way, I could come do one of these trainings for your whole department.
Yes.
Okay,
We
because you guys are one of our districts, Martin County is one of our districts. Absolutely. Do you know I haven't been there? Would love to come. So I had a very good friend from INS. So, give you guys an example of what this looks like in the classroom. So here's your compelling question. Alex walks in the room and I somehow start stumbling. Your supporting questions that go with that is, why did the British Parliament raise taxes on the colonists? What actions taken by the British Parliament angered the colonists? Can you see now how it gets targeted? But each day, for each of these questions, you have multiple sources, primary and secondary, that the kids use that day to answer that compelling question. Here you go. This is when you incorporate economics. Because look at this question right here. What did the British Parliament, or why did they raise the taxes? Economics all day long. You know, but also other ones. What actions taken by the British Parliament? Some of those are economic, some of those are civic. Do you see what I'm saying? You're going to be bringing in your content, which makes people nervous, right? They're like, you can't teach content and do inquiry. As my little cousin used to say, she couldn't say yes. She said S. Yes, it is. So S, you can. You can, I promise you. So using evidence. So this one we've already talked about a little bit. And notice here I've highlighted. And you will notice that it's highlighted in your notes. So keep that in mind. What is the real goal of using evidence? And we've already talked about that. To collect, evaluate, and synthesize evidence from primary and secondary sources. This is a biggie. These are the words of KTE. So notice here to me when I see words like this, it says within the using evidence standards, students are required to. When you see the word students are required to, what does that make you think about?
You gotta do it.
You gotta do it. Oh my gosh. Do it, okay? Which is, use sources to answer compelling and supporting questions every day, you guys, every day. If I were in the classroom, my compelling question for every unit would always be on my board. I have one teacher, and I'm going to interview her and put her on one of my podcasts. I'm also going to put, because by the way, we're developing podcasts. It's my podcast buddy back there. So I'm going to, again, I'm going to send you guys this stuff, later. But what she does is that she actually bought, and I know you guys know about those teaching, in those teaching catalogs, you can get color stripped. You get strips, but they're in different colors. She has yellow strips for economics questions. She has green strips for geography. And for her supporting questions. She has purple and of course blue. And when she has a supporting question up, and again, I have pictures of this, when she has a supporting question up, the kids know that day that is a civics, and by the way, for 8th grade and high school, and actually 7th grade, maybe 6th, I'll check. But anyway, for all of them, they have to know the characteristics of a civics question. They have to know the characteristics of a geography, economics, and history. They have to know the characteristics of each of those disciplines. What kind of questions would those people ask? It's in the standard. So the kids got to do it. So that being said, so she actually organizes, she always has her compelling question up. That's a different color because it can be. It's compelling. She gets as close to the teal color, which is our inquiry color, as she can, and then she puts all those things down in there. So the other one is analyze sources and apply relevant information. What does relevant information mean? It means it's evidence. Because this is, as it says up here, evidence-based claims. Communicating conclusions, bring it all together. Notice I put in red the big things you gotta know. Defined by students' ability to effectively communicate their own conclusions. Here's where I like to talk about our special education students. Or our students with special needs is what we need to call them, okay? You will be amazed at how it is students with challenges that do the best in inquiry. Don't you think, Jenna?
Yeah.
Because guess what? They can think all day long. They have different on and off ramps. Communicating for them, reading together all of the information, if it's constantly reading, that's going to overload, okay? So you're going to help them, you're going to accommodate those sources to bring them in, okay? But then the off ramp, which is always writing, it doesn't always have to be writing. We have Google Speak to Text. We have numerous that have just left my head, but I have them saved on my thing. I'm going to share that article with you guys. That there's multiple ways for the kids to communicate. It can be speaking. It can be clips on the phone. On the iPhone you have clips. They can record a clip and send it to you. They can record, like I said, Google Speak to Text. They can do a Flipgrid, Seesaw. Flipgrid and Seesaw are good for high school. This whole idea that it's only elementary and maybe just a little middle, no. They have Seesaw and Flipgrid for high school. So the purpose and function, again, I highlighted these. Synthesize information. This is why it's great. Just like I said, the graded discussion. When you grade that discussion, you can have your kids answering the supporting question all day long. And notice how I've got the little thing on there. By the way, I also had another little trick that I did with it we don't have time to talk about. Construct explanations and arguments. So that's another component of our communicating. So let's go back to this. So let's talk about this in this review. Man, I'm flying, but we're doing it. I love it. Here we go. We have 19 minutes. And I'm taking every second of it. So anyway, so let's look at this. So when you think about the inquiry practices, and I'm not going to back up and look at all of those. What is something when you think about the inquiry practices that was some new learning for you today?
engage would be new for me.
Really? In what way?
It just doesn't seem to be the focus a lot, especially when the focus is on maybe the types of assessment we traditionally do in the classroom.
Uh-huh.
That makes me kind of wonder.
Have you seen the practice test?
I haven't seen the field test yet.
I don't do field tests. Oh, don't even say those words. No, no. I'm talking the practice test. Oh my gosh, see again? Sydney, I got you. I got you. I'm all over this, okay? We'll talk about it. If you look at the practice test, that ain't
It'll
no...
change your life and how you teach.
Completely.
Because like I thought I was teaching right, and then I looked at the practice test and I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
I am not doing this right.
When I do the duty, okay, y'all write this down. You may want to come to this because it goes deeper in depth, even though you can understand it, but you can always learn. We're doing a new teacher, when are we doing the new teacher social studies one?
Let me go get my calendar.
Awesome, so she'll go get that and we'll tell you in a minute, okay?
And I'll
But
take
that date, put on your calendar and save it. That's
Yes.
6 hours. That is in depth, and we take a big look at the practice test as part of that. So she's getting that. So let's look at the third quick. Now notice how you guys, I've organized your note taking. Notice that I've got here supporting question, and over here is evidence. You know, this graphic organizers, we call that organizational task, or what JCPS calls an organizational task. I'm helping you organize your information, help your kids do this too. Okay? And that's not me giving teeny tiny little bitty questions over here that I want them to pull out. We're gonna have the kids pull out the information, not us. So how do I develop an understanding of the what and how for my grade level? I am going to force myself, by the way. I'm gonna do a 5-minute timer every few seconds, and you're gonna laugh at me when I say that, maybe. Daggone it, phone, work with me. Because you guys, we gotta hustle through this last part. I'm gonna make sure that I'm changing slides actually every 2 minutes. I'm gonna keep doing it. So, go here first. Go to your grade band overview. So a while ago when I gave you those numbers, so 139 for high school, 96 for middle, right? So go to your grade band overviews. It is so, again, important in your PLCs to dissect this grade band overview. That tells you the expectation of each grade for your grade level. Unfortunately, high school, it only tells you the requirements or the instructional needs for geography, economics, history, because we do not have prescribed classes necessarily. We do have to follow, of course, the coding, for number, according to KDE, but it looks very different for us. For middle school, there's very specific needs for 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. So looking at that, this is so important to go into. Then the other one, now go to your grade level that you teach. Stay where you are, Sydney. For you, you're all grade levels.
Yeah.
Stay in your sections, you guys. So here's what's interesting. For instance, I'm going to use you as an example. You're going to need to go through and really do an in-depth dive into the introduction for your grade level, okay? So Sydney, it looks like this for them. And I want you to be familiar with that because it would be really good for you guys in high school to go back and look at 8th grade. Because that's what they have to have by the time they get to you. So looking at this, so we see this whole opening paragraph. This opening paragraph is life. Okay, I would probably even put that on my notes. Notice I would tell you sometimes I would put grade level overviews on your notes. That means you go back to it and you study it and you dissect it and you highlight it and underline it. Because like I've got, how might this grade specific overview be useful to you in your role? You need to know exactly the needs of your students, instructionally and assessment-wise. What does this look like in practice? Here's another support. So the first 2 supports I showed you guys was the grade band overview. The second support within your standards is the grade specific. See, I'm going to repeat. And then, of course, what does this look like in practice? Now, what it looks like in practice, here's another cool thing, especially for middle school. I have a teacher that I recorded last year. I have a phenomenal video that you can watch to see her. She does 6th grade social studies, to see how she really brings in that compelling and supporting questions and everything. But what this looks like in practice, by the way, high school, you guys don't have this. I know, middle school, you do. That's the next section. When you go through each of your graded sections, I believe that this is the 3rd or 4th section in each section. To also give you guys an idea of how our standards are coded, I have taught so long. I have taught in Kentucky since 1987. And you guys, our standards, oh my gosh, I've seen every manifestation of standards that we've ever had in this state. And believe me, these are the most organized and the most thorough I have ever seen. Again, very proud to be part of that moment. I was on a review committee. I was not on a writing committee. So we did a whole lot of reading and looking. One thing I loved about it right off the bat is this was something that, you have to look at when you look at our standards. I mean, we used to have standard, oh my gosh, crazy numbers. You guys never saw this. You learned under it though because you're so young. You would have a standard that would say SS.26.42 or whatever. And it was what does all this stuff mean? It meant nothing to me because there was no specific organization. And then when you had the standard written out, sometimes they would give you examples of things. Like they would give you parentheses and they would say McCarthyism, Cold War, long telegram. That's curriculum. You can't put that in, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you can't direct it. And they would actually have that written into the standard itself. So they would have all these, IE and all this other kind of stuff. Drove me crazy with their old standards. I love this because look, okay, the top one is an elementary, which you will use, which is grade level. Then it tells you the disciplinary strand, in this case it's civics. Then it tells you the concept and practice. So like for instance, if it's in geography and it's human interaction, it's going to say HI. Again, I'm going to keep reminding myself so I hustle. Then of course it's point 1. When you're looking at high school, so here we go, Sydney. For high school, we're always going to have high school. We're going to have our disciplinary strand because we have all 4 strands. We're going to dictate which class, as a department, we're going to say, okay, these 18 standards are going to be taught in freshman year, and you're going to say these 20 in sophomore and these, 200, no I'm kidding, in, junior. Then we have the inquiry strand, so it's going to tell you, in this case it says inquiry. Then the next one is going to tell you which inquiry practice, which is going to be questioning, using evidence, or communicating conclusion. Investigating does not have a standard because the investigating standard is the same for all of us, K-12. Now, elementary, K-8. Don't even have to really talk about this very much at all, but it's good for you to kind of see. Yes, we now have our assessments, our K-5, 6-8, 9-12. All God's children are evaluated now. All God's children are assessed. There is the expectation that K-3 will be engaging in socials. And I say expectation because it is statute, it is law. That is the requirement, is that we have social studies across the board. I know the reality, we won't talk about it. But you guys can see here, it builds on the concept of community from kindergarten through 3rd grade. Myself and my community, impact on community and state. Yes, 1st graders are doing Kentucky studies, it's no longer 4th grade. Then we have grade 2, North American interactions, grade 3, global interactions. Then we have grade 4, migration and settlement. As my daughter used to say, this is big kids school. This is when they get deep into the disciplinary practices, very deep in 4th grade. They start doing it in 2nd grade, big time. But 4th grade is where it's really deep, very intentional. Then of course we have, now notice that grade 5 is colonization, to Constitution. Hard stop at that Constitution. They want to go on to the Civil War because they love it, so nay, do not. Because 6th grade development of civilizations, growth and expansion, grade 8, they get to fight the Civil War. That's it. That being said, see, I'm doing this to make myself go through each of these slides quickly. I'll leave this in there. You guys don't need this because you're middle and high, but I always put this in there for elementary folks in case they need it. Because it kind of just gives them a roundabout description of the first part. There's kindergarten, but what I want to show you guys, here's 4th grade. Look at the things that 4th grade has to make sure that they're teaching. And look at the approach to it. Notice, like for instance, look at their geography. Compare the distinctive cultural characteristics of groups that immigrated or were brought here forcibly to the U.S. from other nations or regions. That's their geographic focus for 4th grade. See, notice it's kind of targeted. It's broad in topic, but it's targeted. It doesn't say to look. Now you do have some standards in there, but this is the overall theme for the geography. It's not just this big focus of teaching the kids how to read a map. The expectation is that that's going to be part of your supporting question of work and things like that. But your overall theme for the geography in that. Here's 6th grade. Notice under the green, students compare how human and environmental characteristics of a region influence the movement of people, goods, and ideas. Every time you talk about a different group, this is your geographic focus. There's 8th grade, thought I would throw that in there. By the way, high school, it's impossible to put you in this, and I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
But being a high school person, it hurts me too. Like for instance on this one, look at the civic expectation of 8th grade. Everything you talk about in 8th grade should be analyzing the role of citizens in the U.S. political system with attention to the definition of who is a citizen, because that changes drastically up through 1877. Now high school, you will look at that theme because then it really expands. This includes immigrants, but only male. You know, and this also includes African American men. That changes, of course, in 1920. Now, understanding what these standards look like in practice. Oh, okay, why did I put that in there again? So I'll erase that one. Okay, good. Repeating myself. Okay, good. I have 8 minutes left with you. I'm going to make myself go fast. When we look at inquiry in terms of the disciplines, this is when it's incorporated. Is in the bottom half. The top half is your assessment. Whatever your compelling question is, that is your assessment for the unit. And I'll say that again, so you might want to jot that one down. Whatever your compelling question is for your unit, that is your assessment. That is the question the kids will answer. So here's the kicker, no more gotcha. No more seeing if the kids are paying attention for obtuse or obscure little details, like how tall was Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn, or how did he have his hair fixed, or how many fringes were on his jacket, whatever it may be. That information is so minute, so abstract, it is not important to the moment. It's who was fighting at Little Bighorn, who was there, whose side of the story was told. That's the kind of stuff that we get into for them. And again, that's going to be, high school. So, no, Little Bighorn, that would be 8th grade. Yeah, I had to go back for a second, sorry. But anyway, so when we start looking at this, we think about, assess, or maybe, I gotta check the date on that. That might be one of those overlaps. So anyway, so look at the learning part. Using evidence and investigating, those go hand in hand, okay? Because because to me, when you look at that, when you think about using evidence investigating, that's the action of social studies. That's what a historian or political scientist or geographer, that's what they do. That's when we practice the skills of our content. CAS or social studies, this is how your units would be organized. Notice how we always have our compelling question. We have our investigating, which is the same. But look at, now here we go, Sydney. This is when we plug in those standards. Do you see what I'm saying? This is when they're going to interact. It's no more geography unit, economics unit. This is how we fix that. And then, of course, we have our using evidence standards for middle and high. That's going to be very different. Now, again, instruction through inquiry. So let's look at these really quickly. Stole this from JCPS, or rather borrowed, so that you guys could see that. So their compelling question, what unites us, or what unites Americans? You can reverse that question a little bit. So you can see here, how did British taxation, so again, these questions look familiar? Yes. How did ideas unite the colonists? How did the colonists organize themselves? So here's your daily instruction within that unit. I would have at least 10 to 15 more questions, at least. Couldn't put all of them up here, just use 3. But look at what that one day looks like. So this might give you a little bit of an idea. Oops, let me go back for a second. So, notice this is 5th grade, this could just as easily be 8th grade. Like 5th grade and 8th grade do have some commonalities, like both of you. But here's the thing, while you have 5th grade that's going to fight the American Revolution, I shouldn't say fight, they're going to have the American Revolution happen. And of course, we're not going to memorize battles. We're not going to talk about that, but we're going to talk about how some battles maybe were really important. Why we those, some of those, just a few, like Saratoga might be one, Yorktown definitely is one. We're not going to go into all this big depth, so we can tell these really cool stories about Washington, talk about Valley Forge and frostbite and all this other kind of stuff that's really gross that middle schoolers love, or elementary kids love. We're not going to necessarily talk about that, but what we are going to talk about is what was the significance of Valley Forge. What did that do to us as people? So I'm going to make sure I have a source that tells that story. I'm not going to tell that story. I'm not going to do that lecture. I'm going to have a source that tells that story. Okay? So anyway, so let's go back to this then. So if I'm looking at the day, we're talking about how did the colony, so my point about 5th grade and 8th grade, 5th grade does a lower level learning in it, but 8th grade does the deeper learning. Very deeper learning in that. And that doesn't mean more information. That means you take that thing about, why we're fighting that American Revolution and looking at the concept of changing citizenship and everything and really taking that into the discussion. So here's one day, how did the colonists organize themselves? I know you guys are like, can you please stop that? This time I'm going to, because I'm almost at the end. So when we look at this, so what kind of sources did I use to teach this question? This is very important. What kind of sources did I use?
Well, primary and secondary.
I used primary, secondary, but what else do you notice?
Well, one's kind of a graphic. So source B, you got that timeline, so you can use it like a graphic. And then source A, honestly, that sounds like a graph. And source D,
It's a
That's
reading.
probably, yeah, that's a reading.
But what do you also notice about these?
They're scholarly.
Yeah.
They are scholarly.
They're also color coordinated.
Ah, and what, there we go, that's what I'm looking for. So, what are the disciplines I'm incorporating for this question?
Geography and civics.
Geography and civics. Big now. Okay, now do you see how, and look at, and here's it, using evidence to develop claims in response to compelling and supporting questions. So see, this is how it's so very different. Then the last thing, this is huge, high school. It's in your all's folder, and I'm going to take some time to show you guys that folder. So I'm actually going to have to come up here and sit for a minute. Disciplinary clarifications, huge.
Yes.
This is the section, I love how, so you can tell we're Jenna's son. She's like, yes.
They're so helpful.
Oh my gosh. That's when you actually go into, and you have this as a separate document. This is on kystandards.org, but it is in your folder. I put it there so you guys can have it. So you guys will see right here, it takes these standards, gives them a slight breakdown. This is the floor, not the ceiling, okay? This is not as high as you go. So if you guys look at this in the cast for social studies, which standards are more important, you think? The inquiry practices or the disciplinary strands? So what do you all think? This is our reflection. Just shoot it out there because we're going to go fast. If I go over 1 or 2 minutes, are you guys going to like turn me in?
No.
Just checking. I love it.
Well, which standards are more important? Oh gosh.
No right or wrong answer. This is
That's a
your
hard
claim.
question.
This is your claim, your conclusion, not mine. Because to me, they're all important.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's situational. I think knowing about the disciplines and knowing about civics and geography, economics, and history is important, but it's also important to understand the inquiry practices, so that way you can know, when you look at sources, is it trustworthy? Can you believe everything it says?
Can we just say both and put them together?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you just did that. That was beautiful. So how does all of this impact assessment? This is the last thing I want to talk about really quickly. I may be done right on time. This is super important for you. You need to really take note on this, okay? Now, notice this is your last question, I think, on... No, it's not, because I actually threw this in at the end. So if you want to put this on the back or to the side of something so you guys can remember this, keep in mind, and this is according to our assessment blueprint for social studies. Our assessment, 50%, so we have each one is going to be 25, 25, 25, 25, except in history, high school, that's going to be 12.5 US, 12.5 world. Okay, it's not going to be this big old heavy US, no. So each of these disciplines will be represented on the assessment according to the blueprint equally. Equally. When we take into consideration how we don't teach economics to the level or frequency that we need to, that almost completely removes 25% of the test. Take into consideration our geography, which, by the way, do not have kids duplicate maps. That's not a geographic skill. That is not a geographic skill. Using maps constantly for information. Francis, one of those that you identified in that, source A was a geographic source. It was, or had a geographic component to it. So using them for information is what we do. So considering that we're not really doing that to the level we need to, let's take off another 15% there. So those kids are going into 60% of what they need. Now let's do a little bit more math. If you're not doing inquiry at all, that removes 51%. Your kids are going into that assessment with 20 to 30% of what they need. If you are not doing inquiry and not doing full incorporation of all of the standards. So, what does our assessment look like? It's aligned to new standards. It's directed by the blueprint, but most importantly in Kentucky, we are what they call dual aligned, which means you are evaluating inquiry at the same time you're evaluating a content. Now, I'm only telling you what's in the assessment blueprint. I'm not telling you anything that I would, because I only know the practice test. I only know what I see. Now, have I taken the blueprint and evaluated it? Not yet. I haven't had time to do that. Maybe one day I can sit down with a teacher and do that. That would be fun. Here I am. Oh my gosh, Mary, I did it. It is 11:51.
Yeah.
I am done. So here I am. Take a screenshot. Listen, you have myself a number?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I thought so. Call me. Text me. Maybe text me before you call me. That might be better. My husband has kind of made me put a thing on my phone during the week.
September 23rd, newbies.
September 23rd. Write that down.
For new
Newbies.
teachers.
Yes.
In social studies, grades 4 through 12.
Thank you, Mary. September 23rd. So keep in mind, and like I said, there's my cell phone, there's my email, everything you need, and I'm there for you. Thank you for being here, thank you for going over 2 minutes, but most importantly, don't forget to do your feedback, or to access the other one there, accesses the folder. So I know that you were here, now that I know you're here, now that I know your name, but again, Cindy, take my phone number down, talk to Miss Williams. You guys are my districts. I'm not happy unless every one of my districts are doing awesome on the assessment or just doing awesome in general. I'm not happy. So
we're gonna disappoint you on that assessment.
No, you don't disappoint me. That doesn't matter. But my motivation is always to do what you guys need. So don't worry, don't think about me. Think about you and what I can do for you so you can do
Does
awesome.
this mean potentially we might actually start receiving funding and like actual, like when they test a subject, they seem to care about it more.
Oh.
So is that?
So is there gonna be stuff to buy materials and things?
Yeah, like
Listen, there's a lot of materials out there. I did not have time to do that today. There are a lot of materials that are out there that you don't need to spend a lot of money. And believe me, you're gonna hear those at the new teacher thing. But until then, I'm happy, Sydney, to come in, like, if you're sitting there one day and you say, and you can ask Jenna, I did this with her, yell at me and we'll Zoom during your planning.
Okay.
I'm happy to do this. I actually physically went to her on her planning. So that's
But
different.
it's okay, I'm in Jenkins and she
Yeah.
lives in Winter County, so.
Yeah, so that ain't no
okay,
big.
you're not-
But I'm happy to Zoom with you during your planning and to do that whole kind of thing. I want to, as a matter of, work me. That's my job.
Hey, you
Alright.
told me to remind you about something. First, second, and third reads.
Okay, so when we do, okay, we can do this because it's just us. Okay, so when you're doing reading with your kids, first time they do nothing. They read. They read to get the gist, as we call it. We do a gist reading, okay? They just read to see what they know. Second time that the kids go through and read, that's when they're going to identify words, okay, that they need to know, that kind of thing. You can come on in. I'm done. We're just talking. And third time they read is when they go for content and go for information. There's a format to do that. It's called chunking and that kind of thing, but we can talk about that later. That's probably going to be part of the training that we do, okay? All right, I'm going to hush.